Well, I don't think we'll catch her. I think we'll just let her stand there. So the main thing about having her, the reason I wanted to put one in there is to talk a little bit about injection sites and where. So, and y'all can come on in here, it's okay. We'll just try to make sure the camera can see. But you know, we look at in front of that shoulder. There's that slope of the shoulder, and we've got that nuchal ligament, which is up here, that neck strap, which is so big and thick. So how they hold their head up. And we got the neck bones. Those are the areas that we got to avoid. So everything else is kind of fair game. So when we look at that area, it's not great big. So that means if we're going to give shots up there, we need to pay attention. So remember, if you're giving more than one injection, separate them by hand's width, especially if we're talking about IM injections, make sure you're at least a hand's width apart. Now, there's personal things that I don't have any science about, but things that I like. If there's a lymph node right here at the point of the shoulder, the prescapular lymph node, and we talked about how vaccines are picked up and they go to that first local lymph node and they're sorted on. You know, and I don't know how many of you, like especially with blackleg vaccines, a lot of those blackleg vaccines have what's called an alum precipitate in it. And when that alum gets to that lymph node, it makes the lymph node swell up and get sore. So a lot of times if you see calves that are really reluctant to bring that leg forward, a lot of times that lymph node is hurting them. So one of the things that I like to do is, if I can, I like for my blackleg vaccine to be a little farther away from that lymph node so that that alum doesn't travel so far. So one of the things that I like to do is right there where the neck joins on, right here, that skin is really pretty loose. It's up, you know, it's up pretty high. That's where I like to use things like Ivomec or blackleg, things that are more irritating, because that skin is a little looser and you're farther away from that lymph node so it doesn't hurt as bad. So that's where, if I'm given a sub-Q injection of Ivomec or things that are irritating, I try to go high, right up here where that skin's loosest. And then my vaccines, I'm more comfortable giving them more in the middle of the neck if I need to or whatever, because for one thing, generally the volume is smaller with those, especially viral vaccines and stuff. So I'll go up more into the flat of the neck and stuff like that. So obviously, if you tint, when you tint that skin and pull that up, you want to go right behind the tint that you make. But you got to remember, from a safety standpoint, your facilities have to allow that. Now with this heifer moving back and forth, if I was just vaccinating where I wouldn't catch her heads, I'm probably not sticking my hand in there and trying to tint. So if you're going to vaccinate, remember, from a sub-Q standpoint, what matters is the angle of your syringe. And how you angle that, you have a greater opportunity to do a correct sub-Q injection. So you make that angle fairly steep. So I'm not going to go in this way. I'm going to go parallel to the muscle that I'm going to, because I want to avoid it. So when I'm going to do sub-Q on something like this, I'm going to come in and I'm going to go at a very sharp angle like this, almost parallel to that neck. And you'll feel whether or not you're in the skin. Now sometimes when you start to squeeze that syringe, and if it's really hard, you're still in the skin. And some of the knots that occur when you vaccinate or whatever is because we got some in the skin, and of course there's a lot more reaction that takes place with that, and so there's a greater risk of those knots forming. But if we have a knot from a sub-Q injection up here on the neck, are we concerned about it? Would you be? If you're buying a set of calves and you saw knots on the neck, what would that tell you? They were vaccinated and vaccinated sub-Q. Now what does the buyer really say? They got knots. Well, we don't like knots. We got to take them at a nickel back or whatever. But when they get in the car, they're saying, "Man, I just got a set of calves and I know they've been vaccinated correctly." You know, they love that stuff. So really, I am not concerned about a knot that occurs from a sub-Q injection, especially up here, because where does the knot go? When you jerk the hide, it goes with the hide, right? So it doesn't affect our product at all. So that's why it's so important. But the big thing is the top bud up here, and I put a jillion injections up here because I thought it was a great place, because that's a really nice muscle and it's easy to get at. You can get at it from a catwalk. And I thought we were doing really good things until you start figuring out that we were really tearing product up. So now we don't do anything on the back end of a cow, okay? Especially in the rounds the round has too high of an injection site blemishes. we have people out there that are still sticking it down there in the bottom button. We should get away from that. Especially if you're going to go IM, everything go in front of the shoulder. Okay? Any questions? Anybody have anything? Okay. So the second thing I was going to talk about, I see we have a pipe.
There's a pipe here and some T-posts.
Oh, just a T-post. I don't need something real heavy. I just wanted to... This is another one of those common sense things. If we're going to put a pipe behind this cow, or this heifer to whatever we're going to do, where should we stand? Especially if I'm in an alley farther back there, if she's coming in, I don't want to be standing here, do I? Because if I slide this in halfway and she backs up, what happens to me? That's exactly what happens, just like that, is this comes this way. And that's where I've seen ruptured spleens, is this pipe with the cow sailing backwards at an alley. And what does everybody try to do? You try to hurry and get that pipe in there as fast as you can. And if you don't catch it, you just got wiped out. And so you got to be conscious of where you're standing. So I always tell people, stand at the end of your pipe. You don't stand on one side or the other, you stand at the end. If you need to adjust your setup, then do it. And what I like to do on mine, on the hours that we weld pipes on here that have some length to them, so that you can have your pipe started in there pretty good ways. In fact, it's self-supportive. And then that way, if you start it through, and if a cow backs up, the bar does not go forward because that collar is there, okay? That piece of pipe that holds it. But you got to be, this pipe is dangerous. And I was telling the story last night, I ended up at the hospital because we had an old Bramer cow that all day long she peeled back. She'd never come on, and she was a F1 cow, and by the end of the day, she's the last cow, so she is nuts by this time, and she's a psycho. And the guy that was running the head catch left the head catch open, and he was filling his syringe right there. Now I was working the pipe and closing the tailgate, and so I had this pipe, and I was standing here like this, and I was watching, and I was talking to Pat, and he had closed the head catch. And what I did is I reached over like this to try to close that head catch, and when I did, that pipe hit me, and it turned me over, and I hit my head on something, and I went into seizures. And at that time, my 7 or 8 year old son was with me, and he didn't know how to operate a radio telephone, which is all the communication we had, because he was trying to call an ambulance. And I was out for several minutes, and it was serious. It was a scary thing. But I had a stripe from where that pipe hit me that stayed for almost 2 years. You could see it every time I took my shirt off. You could see where that bar hit me. And so this is a dangerous thing. For one thing, it needs to be stout enough to handle what you got, like a piece of drill stem works pretty good, or a drill bit. That's what we have to use. But the other thing is set your deal up to where if somebody is not very well trained on the pipe, that you build some precautions in. So that's one thing you can do, is whatever side you work the pipe on, weld a piece of pipe that's longer, so that if a cow does back up, it's not just the bar that's holding it, which will take that bar forward on them. You got to be really careful with that. The other thing is that around a chute, there's always stuff that you have to pay attention to. The bars, all that stuff. I don't know how many of you used the old WW Man Killer. You all know that one, the guillotine type chute. Had that bar that was kind of rotated. It'd hit you right there in the chin and turn your lights out. I mean, it would just knock you silly. And it happened all the time. It's kind of like a Tico. Anybody ever use a Tico? You know how those things, when they don't quite latch and they hit that head catch and that bar comes around, and I mean, it'll squash you if you're not careful. If you're on the wrong side, you got to be in front of that bar on a Tico, because if you're behind it trying to catch those things and they hit that and the latch doesn't hold, which it frequently doesn't, then you're mashed up against there, and those are serious injuries. So especially around the chutes, you got to watch for. I know there was a chute brand called Thorson's. They were a manual chute. I liked them really good. They were really good, well-designed chute. But the head catch, when it came open, there was an angle iron frame that went around there, and people would stand there, and as they're visiting, they put their hand up there. When you open the head catch, you whack their fingers off, just like that. And so those are the hazards that you need to stop and think about and look at with your facilities. Is there something you can do to prevent that from happening? You got to make sure that whoever is assigned to this particular task, they understand that this is your world. Because for one thing, whoever's operating the head catch, they don't have time to pay attention to everybody else. They have to rely that you will take care of yourself. Even though in the back of their mind, most guys do pay close enough attention to try to watch out for everybody. Nobody wants anybody hurt. But as employees, you have to be aware that they're not watching for you. You've got to make sure you take care of your business. You work in your sphere and make darn sure that what you do is what everybody else is expecting you to do, and no more. Because if you're trying to reach up there to do something else for somebody else, they may not. If you didn't do it on 10, I tell people all the time, if you're going to do it, you do it on every one. Because I will rely that you will do that. But you don't spot do it. Because then I don't know if you're going to do it this time or not. So then I can't plan for that. So especially for those folks that are having to work the shoot, they got their own stuff to pay attention to. They cannot be paying attention to everybody else. So you need to be aware of those things. Head catch like this, which this isn't a very good head catch, but pipes and bars around the chute are things that really hurt you. And so you got to be aware. I'm sure most of you that have been around Powder River have the lumps to prove it, because you're always banging your head on that bar. And so those are things, I know people that have made those things detachable. They've tried painting them with fluorescent paint, all of that stuff. But what ends up happening is that somebody will do it right 100 times, and 101st they'll hit their head. And so it's really important that you go through and fix the things that you can. Those folks that are working in the back, you got to remember that animal safety is important. And it's important to me as a veterinarian. I know there's places, I can tell who's in the back when those cattle come up to me. Because there's people that'll bring them up, and those cows will be really quiet and nice when I get there. Or when I'm doing my stuff, when those cows come in the chute, they come in quiet and they leave quiet. There's also people in the same outfit that I know if they're in the back, those cattle are going to be stirred when they come to me. And I have to pay more attention because they're not going to be as settled and they won't be as quiet. So how you handle them way back there really makes a difference to what happens to me up here. And the quieter you are in the back, the quieter they are when they get to me. And so whoever's in the back needs to be somebody that really pays attention to being quiet and calm, doesn't fret, doesn't yell, isn't whacking on them with a stick all the time, stuff like that. Because if they'll just move them quietly when they get to me, it makes it faster. We found for sure that when Will brings those cattle up, we can be really fast because we don't have, those cattle aren't turned upside down and everything else. But when there's another guy back there, we go slower. The cattle come in at an accelerated pace, but it is not faster because of the wrecks we have to deal with. So from a safety standpoint, it starts way in the back, starts before you ever get in the corral. You got to make sure that everybody understands that we're relying on whoever's bringing them up to bring them up in a manner that we can deal with them when they come up here. It's not fair to the cattle if we're stirring them so bad back there that they're nuts by the time they get here. That's not the cattle's fault. So pay attention to those things. And from a worker safety standpoint, remember, set them in a place where they can work safely, especially those that have less experience and stuff that need more supervision. I really enjoyed the presentation last night. I thought it made a ton of sense, what Mr. Braden was saying with a lot of that stuff. So the tasks that you give those folks, make sure they completely understand what it is and include, these are the do's and don'ts. Okay, this is what we expect you to do, but don't do this, because then it puts you in harm's way. So make sure that they understand that this is a task that has some safety concerns with it, and so that they understand that. But when you're bringing those cattle all the way from the time they get into the corral till the time they get up, you got to keep the safety things in mind about what am I going to pay attention to. And so from this cow from this little heifer standpoint, everything we do, we want to try to make this as pleasant as it can be. Now, she's not comfortable being by herself and all this, and we understand that. But from her standpoint, what we want to do is make it quick and as painless as we can make it, and as quiet as we can make it, and as stress-free as we can make it. Is there stress associated with it? Absolutely. But if we can minimize that stress, then our opportunity for immunizing or whatever is increased. And we all know it. There's cattle back there that are going to fret from the moment you put them in, and they fret the whole day. And what we're doing to them when they get up here probably doesn't have a very large impact because they fretted all the benefit out of it before they ever got in it. So those are things that we have to consider, okay? Any questions? I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Most of you have been through it and seen it and all that other stuff. You know what I'm talking about. But what we have to do is communicate it better than we have. Because I know for sure there's lots of outfits that I worked at, there was nothing ever said. You were just assumed that you would know it or learn it as you went along. And what we have to do is, because of the background of employees we're getting and stuff, we have to be much quicker about sharing our experience and sharing the things that we know with them, because they don't come with those skills like they used to. So we have to be quick to explain and show, and don't assume. Just start from the basics and tell them this is what we expect. These are things you need to be cautious of. These are some concerns that we have, and you got to pay attention to this and assign them to tasks that they can accomplish. We sure don't want somebody that's never ran a head catch before to be on the head catch to revac 600 head of calves today. That's not a good, that's destined for failure. That's not going to work. And so don't put them in that position. So anything else? Any thoughts that you all have that you can add to instruction? Some of you have done this a lot more than me. So if you have some thoughts or something like that, well, just spit them out there. Anybody have anything? Well, if not, we'll migrate back and head to lunch. What do you think? Okay. Well, thank you all for being here, and we appreciate you coming out for this. This is the first, obviously, and we're learning. We have our training pants on, so all your feedback is very important. Okay. Thanks. We'll head to the center.